David, how's it going?
What's up, John? It's going good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Reporting live here from Boston, Massachusetts. You're back in Berlin.
Back in the B, the dirty B. That's right. Yeah, I'm back in Berlin. It's definitely feeling like fall here. It's been gray and wet, but there's been a few beautiful days, and yeah, it's interesting to be back. Definitely interesting to be back.
Yeah, I reckon. I know that you've got a love-hate. I don't want to say love-hate, but you have a fun relationship, I guess you could say, with Berlin.
No shade on Berlin for sure. Like Berlin has been really good to me these last 10 years. And I'm so grateful for, be able to come back here and have a place for me. And I know the city really well now. And so there's not a lot of big surprises here. It's just it's definitely a comfort zone, and which is great, which is great. But yeah, definitely, it was like an emotional experience coming back after being on the road for so long. It's this will be the first time I'm staying put somewhere um, for like multiple months consecutively.
Right, right. And so to some extent, your home has been the road for like almost better part of like 6 to 9 months or something like that.
Yeah, well, I would say even longer, maybe 18 months or even 2 years, maybe even a bit longer, just because I wasn't really quite understanding what was happening until maybe 6 months ago, and then it was really kind of dominoing. But yeah, I'd say at least like 18 to 24 months, couple years, it's been like maximum I'm staying somewhere, I'd say like 6 weeks, maximum. And that would be kind of fit between a lot of other moving around. But yeah, I remember at the end of last year, it was feeling like I was very like, where's this going? Um, and then it's funny, like when I came back to Berlin at the end of August, yeah, just feeling like really emotional, like almost like I was no longer home, And even though technically this is my home, this is where I pay my taxes. This is funny. Whenever people are like, "So is Berlin your home?" I'm like, "Well, I pay my taxes there, so." Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, where is more home than that, I suppose. But at least in this world, my family is back over in Canada, but they're even dispersing. Like my brother's now moving out to the East Coast. And Toronto is such a different city than what I grew up in. It really is uh, a different place. And I still question whether it's really a good city to be an artist in anymore. But, I guess it always depends. It's always different for everybody's story is different.
Well, I know that it's such a trite cliche or whatever, but I still believe that home is where you make it. And I think that your
Yeah.
your travels have obviously spoken to that as well.
Yeah, and, I think definitely. I mean, this is also a bit of a cliche too, but I really made my work my home. It's like I don't even really feel like it's work anymore. It's my purpose. I just follow it. I try not to question things too much. Even though it's the questions that drive me, I think I just try to put one foot in front of the other and trust the process. And that's been that's been something I've kind of just said for a lot, but I think especially in the last 6 months, I've really started to feel it. And I'd say that it really clicked in over the summer for me, definitely. There's been a number of events that have occurred this year that have really encouraged that deeper trust. Um, and right now I'm feeling really good about it. And I think really to have faith is it's about action, right? And to work on that. And sometimes I don't feel the faith, but I just have to keep showing up, and it will return. At least that's been my experience.
Amen to that. Without getting too gospel driven over here, amen to that because uh,
Yeah, yeah.
one of my all-time favorite football players, if I can bring this up, a gentleman named Ray Lewis, who's a well-known tough guy in the NFL world.
Cool.
I think that this quote was attributed to him, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but I think that he said something to the effect of, "You can't be a believer and a disbeliever at the same time."
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to have a healthy amount of skepticism, but I think if you want to work on your attitude, you got to work on your gratitude.
It's true.
Oh, and the more I've just found, the more I work on that kind of perspective, it just more and more emerges that makes it easier. And then I guess, and then that faith, I think, becomes foundational. I'm really guided a lot by that's, yeah, for lack of a better terminology, a spiritual direction. And and I look at my work more and more as part of a spiritual practice, really, like that painting is prayer or painting is meditation. Studio work is a practice. That's what it is. And when I go outside, it's like, it's like a conscious contact. And yeah, I sometimes I'm like, is it even worth explaining this? But that's where I'm at with. I just try to be transparent about that stuff because I think the more I try to beat around the bush with it, the less connection I'm making. So yeah.
No, I mean the Taoists believe in walking the path. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's true what Krishna says is like all paths lead to me, and I think like as long as you have commitment and dedication and patience and perseverance to your way, it's all going to lead to the same revelations, the same connections, the same peace of mind, et cetera, et cetera. Equanimity, love, compassion. It will all lead in that direction. It's just with each step, with each resistance, with each obstacle, with each challenge, you have to just deepen it. And that's where it's like really the profound and challenging part is like the only way out is through this classic ism, or this classic, another cliche. I mean, this is the beautiful thing about cliches. We can laugh them off and we can put them down and belittle them, but at the end of the day, like they're cliches for a reason, right? So
I subscribe to that. I subscribe to that. And before we jump in, kind of the uh, biggest, I don't want to say biggest development, but a big development in your life. Um,
right.
just to sort of like kind of put a pin in what you just said, looking back on that show that you had in Rome with Richie Culver
Yeah.
in 2022.
Yeah.
And the work behind you is reminiscent, I believe, of that
Yeah.
of that time period.
Yeah.
How would you reflect on the process of your work, on the evolution of your work, and that spiritual connection that you have to the work till today? October 2nd, 2024.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Well, looking back on that body of painting, it was interesting because I wanted to come. I was still attached to maybe old methods of art making. And I was still like afraid to show the work that I had been doing kind of under the radar or behind the scenes. And mostly that has to do with, I think, like working, I suppose, in a more traditional or representational manner. It comes with a lot of uh, precedence, right? It has history, and I think I felt a lot of pressure that I put on myself to be more than I was, and maybe that also comes from my mom's a painter. She's like a naturalist painter. She's very talented. My older brother is very talented draftsman, and then also my grandmother too. And I just am not like I don't. I've had to really work at my visual language, but I've always felt like art for me was the way I could connect with others. Like it was something was coming out of me that I couldn't understand, but it was doing something. It was connecting me not only to others, but also to myself and to something greater than myself. And I've always just like kind of followed that. And I think that show with Richie at White Noise in Rome, it was kind of me wanting to surrender to that notion, to that thread following, and knowing that I wanted to paint. I wanted to let go of the conceptual parameters I was putting on myself, but I was still afraid to do that. And so I made more like symbolic works. I made more minimalistic works. I made work that maybe was less exposing my my I don't know, for lack of a better word, my honesty. It was less vulnerable, I guess. Even though I was working with color all of a sudden, I was using oil paint and all these things. But then I remember I did that show. It was really exciting, and I was preparing for my first show with Mott projects later that year. And um, in my preparations for that, I met with artist Sky Glabish, who has definitely taken on a much more present role in my life since we met a couple of years ago. And I remember I showed him some of my still life work, and I showed him some of my sketches, and I just remember him being very like, "This is what you need to show." And I remember feeling very uncomfortable with that. But something I've learned from my recovery process and also from my spiritual journey is that usually if something feels uncomfortable, it's usually something I should try and move towards. It's the fear that I need to overcome. So when I did that show with Mott Projects, I took that leap of faith, and even those paintings in it, they were they were kind of still coming from my desire to, I don't know, remain abstract or something. So that's part of why I started working in the method I do, which is like with these very rough plein air sketches using pastels, and then translating those later in the studio to oil paintings, is somehow that for me maintained um, a level of rawness that I was still wanting to convey in my work, because otherwise I would be doing more like very detailed studies. And the funny thing is, like, at that time, because I moved into the pastel and I moved into doing these little tiny sketches, and I was doing them outside, and it kind of forced on me this immediacy thing. And then it's like, okay, translating that to oil, it's like now you're in a slow medium, from a fast medium to a slow medium, and it created some interesting um, outcomes. But the funny thing is like now, because I'm so familiar now with the medium, is like the details are coming in, and like it's a challenge for me to have faith in an image I make that doesn't that I'm not spending like 30 to 40 minutes on plein air, or which is even not a lot of time, because with if I would paint oil, it would even take a bit longer. Could take a lot days. Like Monet would work on a canvas and then come back and work on the same space and the same canvas. So I think Cezanne did the same thing. So I'm still working quick. I'm still working fast relative to the method, but I think what's kind of changed a lot for me is actually I'm bringing drawing, because the funny thing is, like, I'm doing these plein air sketches in pastel, but to me they really weren't drawing. They were just like these raw impressions. But when I went to Iceland, no, when I went was up north in Canada, in Ontario this past winter, I I felt compelled to bring drawing back into it. And for me, when I say drawing, I mean like um, you know analytical study, usually in graphite or some similar medium, to to try and give a relatively realistic impression of something, or a representation of something. And so I brought that back then, but I didn't really notice how impactful that was until I was in Iceland. And then when I was in Iceland, we were in Ludmundafjörður. I don't have time to really go deep into it, but I basically was completely porous in my soul, and I felt very like possessed by a spirit of curiosity. The closest thing I could compare it to is like a Kensho experience, or like touched by God or something. And at that time, I just started doing a lot. I was doing pencil drawing again, and then I was bringing in the pastel to that, and then I was trying out negative spaces and all this stuff. And then that's further informed things in my connection to seeing and perception, and the phenomena of experience. And and it's interesting because the work is taking on more illustrative dimensions, at least in the sketches. I haven't brought those sketches into paintings yet, except for two paintings I had in the Mott project show this past June. The two smaller ones, which are quite a bit more illustrative, and especially the nighttime painting, and that is where I started to bring in, yeah, a little bit more drawing into it. I mean, what's interesting about the nighttime paintings is like I'm often working without any added light. Like I've seen plein air painters working at night and they'll usually have a lamp on or something. And I'm not doing that. I'm I'm working with the light that's available. That's often why I try to work with a full moon or the moon's presence, because then I can at least see the paper in front of me. I can at least see the box of pastels. I don't always know what color I'm pulling out, but at least I can see that. And so that was kind of an interesting experiment. Yeah, and then kind of leading up to my time in Montreal, and then even in New York, and then recently in Luxembourg. Yeah, a lot of people have noted that a lot more details coming into the sketches, and I mean, for me, I see it more as like, yeah, they're becoming more like drawings than, to me, what before they were like, yeah, I mean, I use this term Momentaufnahme. It's just German for snapshots. It's just like this emotive, like snapshot of my experience. And now I'd say they're becoming more like drawings. And is that a good thing? I don't know, but I'm just following the thread. And then, yeah, and then what's really shifted for me with the painting, at least, is when I was in Iceland, I kind of took what I had learned from when I was in Luxembourg last year, like painting on a lot of paintings at the same time. and then also just showing up. But then when I was recently in Luxembourg again, shout out to Erik for, that opportunity to come back again, not as a official resident, but, just to the trust he's shown in me with his place. I had another very profound conversation with Sky when I was there, and yeah, really committed to what I had been saying before already, was that like painting is kind of like a practice. And so I just showed up and did the work. I just showed up and committed to my method, and reserved the judgments for actually the viewer. And I really am trying more and more to not like release what I'm doing until that method's through, like to treat myself more as like a conduit myself, and yeah, I think there's some of the results of those paint. Like I posted one of them. This it's like a moonscape, and what's interesting with that painting is I was working out in Iceland, I was working in New York, and then finishing it in Luxembourg. What was interesting about that painting is like it really only came together once I had that image on there, and then that time and space between it allowed me to detach, and then I could just move the painting beyond the sketch. It could move, and then it became its own thing. And then once it was done, actually, my judgment didn't matter anymore. It was like it had I mean, in art, the art speak used this word agency, but it was like it was alive. It had its own light. It had its own being, and it really wasn't my place to do anything more.
Right.
And yeah,
You had released it into the world.
it was released. Yeah, and I think this is something I need to think more about, is like my job as an artist is to show up for the work and then release it. And I know that sounds simple, but it's like, yeah, there's a lot in there.
No,
Yeah.
but I think whether it's a musician or a novelist or a poet or a painter or, even an athlete or a dancer in the moment, in their aura, in their anima, or whatever you would describe that as. Yeah, it's almost kind of like, how did this work get here? Because it was produced
Yeah.
by you, but once the work is done and the work sort of now, like you said, takes on that
Yeah.
separate persona, it's released into
Yeah.
the world, and it's almost like you're sending it off into sea or something like
Yeah, and then I, as an artist, can engage more with what's the reward of the work, which is not like these achievements. The reward of being a painter is that I get to paint, that I paint, and then this freed me from my dictations on what the paintings are supposed to be or not, and it allows me it liberates me so that I can be fully immersed in what I love about what I do, which is painting and exploring that medium and my method. And yeah, it was it yeah, it gave me a lot more peace in something that I think was giving me a lot, that sometimes, I mean, this is what's beautiful about it, is like in those times that I feel most challenged or resistance is actually the most beautiful parts of the process. It's where, this thing we call art happens. And I'm just it's really a privilege to be able to engage with that.
that.
Yeah,
As long as
it's
I've known you, I can attest, and this is, I think, of one of the higher compliments that anybody can sort of express towards another, in that I can tell that you almost, it seems to me, never stop thinking about your work. in a positive way, meaning you're so intrinsically in it that I think that it's like almost like a micro calibration of different switches because that switch is never all the way down. It's always
Yeah.
on a little,
Yeah.
and and,
Yeah.
and you can feel that.
Well, thank you, John. I mean, it's yeah, it's something that's kept me going, it keeps me alive. It's saved my life and it gives me a lot of purpose. And that's, yeah, what a gift. It's a gift, really. Just like being alive is a gift. This is like this added gift that I have not needed to question what I do each day.
Right.
And like that's I don't so and that I think that's what I mean by having this attitude of gratitude is like it's so easy for me to attach my addiction to things like ambition or my attachments to my desires that I lose sight of actually why I'm here or like what I'm doing, what's my job, and if I can just let go of that by taking account of all the gifts that I have in my life, the abundance of gifts I have, friendships, family, able-bodiedness, living in a peaceful place, and more. Um, I can let go of my self-pity and the frustrations, and I can get a little bit, and then I can get some work done. And like that's what I think is often meant when it's like we need to get out of our own way. Um,
Well, I think it's clear that the universe is listening. I think it's clear that the universe is also speaking back to you. So recently, uh, platform by David Zwirner, a well-known gallery, obviously locations New York, LA, London, Paris, Hong Kong. I know that platform and the galleries, it's all kind of part of the David Zwirner footprint, but they've recently selected you and your works to be a part of a new exhibition alongside other artists. What can you tell us about this?
yeah, yeah, what an opportunity. Yeah, and it's like it's it's really an, um, gosh. It humbles me because if you go on the platform website and you look at the number of artists that they have there and the names, the caliber, it's I'm being up there with that is really an honor. And then although it's not a physical thing, it's online. The work itself is physical, and being in that kind of umbrella of one of the most major galleries has just been so exciting. I mean, I've gotten made fun of a little bit for my excitement about it, but I really don't care. Like I've only started showing my paintings a couple of years ago, and like, these exciting things I have just so much to be grateful for. So, but yeah, so I think the story is like, as far as I know, is because it's through also Erik Sommer, shout out from Mott Projects, that I think platform kind of headhunts or selects artists, and they had contacted Erik over a year ago asking about using my work, and so it's been an ongoing conversation since then. And originally it was supposed to be at the beginning of the year, and there was some rescheduling that happened, and now and then everything got confirmed in June, and then while I was in New York, and and then yeah, now it's coming alive. I'm still kind of like maybe because it's not physical, I'm still a bit like, oh my God, is this even happening? But yeah, the other day they have started, I guess, their program for the October curation by featuring, an introduction to me. And I was kind of like, I didn't expect that. I didn't expect to get that like tip of the spear introduction to the program. So that was really, I almost got no sleep that night, I have to admit. I feel very vulnerable too. That much exposure um, is is really it's a funny feeling. And I'm of course tackling with uh, feelings of what I don't want to expect more. This is such a great thing. So I'm trying to sit in that bewilderment and enjoy it as it is. And then, yeah, there was a lot of preparation for it. The four paintings in the show are oil paintings of houses or architecture and landscape, and which is a subject that's kind of emerged out of my plein air sketches. And I've kind of felt drawn to it just because of, I suppose, my interest in architecture, but I suppose my interest in what architecture can represent. And I guess, I'm looking at a lot of homes, places that have inspired me, which turned out to be a lot of homes, and maybe, and I guess what I'm feeling from that is like, okay, well, where's my home? Where do I feel belonging? And the home is a place where you belong, right? It's not just a building. It's where your life is. And I'm engaging with all these buildings through my expressive manner, and I guess I was kind of looking at that as like, here's this subject, and is my way of interacting with it reflective of the what's going on inside me as well as the atmosphere of the experience. And they just really loved that group because I actually had a bunch of floral paintings and stuff like that, and I thought this is what they're going to want. But they wanted these, and arguably they're the more challenging paintings. Um, but they're very cool.
The color,
Very,
the color story in them,
yeah, the colors are crazy in them. Yeah.
the color story in them is remarkable, and it immediately brings you to that moment there with you, maybe under a three-quarter moon, halfway knowing the color selection of that pastel, and it actually maybe not mattering so much because you're in the moment, you're capturing what you're seeing, what you're really absorbing.
Yeah.
And now that's projected onto the oil as well.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. I mean, what's more to say? I think like I feel like the paintings are they're so raw, and yet so what I hope for is that in their construction, one sees the attention. It's like even though they're very raw, there is quite a lot of like attention put into their construction. And what I hope people realize, like at least what I'm hoping one realizes when you're looking at this painting that looks like, there's a lot of energy happening. It's like that's because I'm working from an energetic moment. Like I'm not just I'm not just doing that on the canvas. It's like it's a trans it's a tr yeah, like a transliteration,
It's a stored
which
memory.
is this idea of like knowledge. Yeah, yeah. Um,
And that memory is imbued with the same energy that you felt, whether it be from being grounded onto the earth that night, from being,
Mm.
showered by the stars that night, whatever. And that, I
Mhm.
mean, when I looked at the selection of works by platform, as somebody
Mhm.
who's a keen observer of your work and the different iterations of your work, I was immediately struck by it as in terms of and I said to you, I said from your suite of work, of those selected works, and this is with all due respect to all the other artists in the presentation, I was immediately drawn to the color story and that energy.
Mhm.
So
Thanks,
powerful.
man. Yeah. Yeah, at first there was some like insecurity that came up when I first saw it because I was just like, wow, because right now there's such a trend for muted colors in painting, and I can feel myself being like, oh, maybe I should go that direction too. But I do feel very committed to my palette for a number of sentimental and like rationales, other reasons, and also for the instinctive nature I have to the colors because I'm just engaging with this like immediate sense of hue or light or density. Sometimes I'm just using the medium based on the level of density of a thing I'm looking at. It's like nothing to do with drawing actually. It's like it's more could be even more sculptural. Like I don't know. I don't know. But
But I think that architecture,
the
like you said, inherently is.
yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, and then what I love about these paintings too is some of them are real experiments for me and like my revealing of like the nakedness of the canvas too. Like especially there's this one painting called Waiting Patiently, and it's like you're really up close to this architecture, which is just done in this very almost like it's in a tornado of color. Um, and some of the stuff, everything's so rough. Like there's like, oh, what is that? Is that a rock? Is that a bush? It's just like moving colors. But then there's all this kind of nakedness of the canvas around it. And I love that because it's like, it becomes closer to memory, become closer to um, like a phenomenon. And then I do this again. Also, there's a painting called Making Believe. And there's so much negative space between some of the colors. I mean, one can clearly see influence of like fauvism or fauvism and the expressionists on me. But I'm not just interested in, um, creating new ways of perceiving form and color. It's like I'm interested also in like how the surface that I'm treating um, can take on new meaning without my implicit dictation on it. Uh, like perhaps if I just do these certain actions, certain things come out of it. And for instance, like if I just glaze the paint, or if I pass the paint, or if I'm working on creating a rougher texture in the paint, or if I'm trying to create if I'm using like wet on wet, or I'm trying to mix in new colors on the canvas itself. And that painting is really cool too because the house in it it looks like it's kind of burning, or like it's kind of like dissolving, but then it's also this structure. And I kind of see that as like the soul too. Like the soul is this constantly morphing thing. And then that repeats again in this painting called what is it? Something about the ghost. Yeah. It's for me, it's the haunted house painting, and it's just like this neon greens on deeper greens on yellow, and it look like if you look at it, it's just like it's like vibrating.
That's
And this is
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I'm trying to get more into with my color usage is like playing with, in like 3D, those old 3D glasses where they like break up the colors. I can't remember what that technique's called, but and in pointillism too, it's like breaking up the colors. But in this, it's like what happens if I use like different tones of the same colors and like mix them up, put them on top and then dab them into, but then also put movements in them. And then it's like when you see it in live, you're just like, what?
It's like distortion fields in a sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I remember that. So that painting is of like this house in Iceland, which was just, it's such an epic, like it's behind waterfalls and cliffs and there's trees and there's the sea and like all this stuff. But the painting's kind of like a little bit up there. And I remember it's kind of also at this angle where you're kind of admiring it, but then it's also like it has a history too. And I think at that time too, I felt very haunted by the place of Iceland, and it was so cold and light was just shifting so quickly. And I just remember like wanting to be in this house, but it's not mine. And there was like a tension that emerged. And yeah, and that's what I was like feeling. It's like, where do I belong? Where is this going? What is this feeling? And perhaps that's the kind of things that emerge when you look at the, what feelings are coming up here. And so, yeah, and I was a little bit like insecure when I first saw the work in that group because I was just like, oh, it really stands out. And I was like, is that a good thing? I mean, maybe what I hope is that there'll be people who really like the work and there'll be people who don't like the work at all. And because I'm often drawn to painting or art in general, that where it's very like you either into it or you're not. And I really want to gravitate my work towards an audience that's like into it, really feels it. And because I don't know, my experiences of trying to please everybody, it's just doesn't work. So yeah, and it's a waste of energy.
It's an impossibility
It's
over.
an impossibility, yeah. And I just feel like there is a lot of art out there which is very pleasing, but like, is that really pushing something in art? I don't know. I'm not saying that I'm, you know, doing anything unique or new, but I am trying to develop my own language.
But you are doing something new for yourself.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I still have a lot more questions than answers about what I'm saying with images and what I'm, maybe it's not my job to answer that question, but um, I think that I'd like to create paintings that propose a lot of questions, like the paintings I really love. Like when we were in Boston, we saw the large Gauguin painting of like from birth to life and death. So many questions come up when you look at that painting. Does it answer anything? The meaning of life in a very like basic way it does, but then it also offers all kinds of other questions. Or like if you look at a Cézanne painting that of like a basic like landscape, and it's like you could just pass right by it. If you didn't know his name, I think a lot of people would just pass by it. But if you really cared, and you looked and you just saw how many questions he has when he's making work, it's very inspiring. It's uh,
Well, is there anything that you can describe moving forward with these, I don't want to say realizations, but just with these feelings and these energies that are obviously moving through your world, you know, what are some of the new inspirations that might kind of be on the horizon?
I'm very excited about. I'm going to be working. I can't really announce exactly what these things are yet, but I'm going to be having like a residency in Berlin over the winter, and I'm going to be in a large space again. I'm going to have the opportunity to work on a lot of painting in close collaboration with an editor. And I'm very excited to let go of my editorial voice and trust someone else so I can just commit to my method even deeper. And that's really exciting me. Also, another thing I'm doing now, I'm kind of trying to, because I'm back in a place which, I mean, I love Berlin, don't get me wrong, but I'm not inspired here. So I'm kind of forcing myself to find curiosity in the day to day. And I live really close to a very historical park called the Tempelhofer Feld, which is a really interesting place. And but it's also a bit like amorphous. Like how do you represent it really? And I'm trying to get into a mode of using that as a subject. I've never really done that before where like I have a lot of different subjects, but I've never been like, okay, this place is the subject. So far the subject has always just been where I'm going. But I've never been like, no, I'm going, this place is a decided subject. And that kind of came on from um the last places I've been where I'll be like, oh, I was in New York City. New York City is the subject. I was in Montreal. What's the subject for me in Montreal was um, certain things that that remind me of my relationship to that place. And so I'm trying to extend that to here too. Like, so I'm trying to just remove the it's so easy for me to be like, oh, I can only enjoy this world if I'm in an epically awe-inspiring place, right? What There's still a lot of beauty in places that I'm overlooking, so I'm trying to get more into that. They call it, the beauty of the everyday. But if I were to really do that, I'd be like painting my room here or my shoes or and maybe that does happen. But right now, I'm still drawn to being outside. I'm still drawn to landscape. Um, I'm still drawn to my experiences of being outside and in the fresh air and all that stuff. So I don't know. I'm trying to just lean into that. Um,
And I will say
yeah, I'm not going to make paintings of my yet. I know I'm disappointing you, John, that you really can't wait for the paintings of my shoes and my underwear, but it's not yet.
I'm
It'll
actually
come. My jock strap, who knows? Yeah.
well, speaking of drug, I was going to say, you do have an affinity for baseball that has kind of been a
Yeah.
cool sort of wrinkle, so maybe that's something down the road. As you
Yeah,
sit here,
we're postseason with baseball. We're now in the wild card games. Fortunately, the Jays, I mean, I'm wearing my White Sox shirt. Arguably, the worst team in baseball history has been the Sox in this season. Like,
I don't even think it's arguable. I think that they're on their way to being historically bad.
I think historically they are the worst team in baseball history. So I don't even know if it's cool to wear the White Sox shirt anymore, but South Chicago can't disregard that gangster. They're also the most like the most. When I was in New York City, a friend of mine was like, I was wearing the shirt, and she was just like, "That is a very murder shirt. It's a very murder." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "When you see like a Chevrolet with tinted windows driving slow down the street." I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "That's like that shirt." I was like, "Okay." So yeah, there's something. I think their branding is definitely the most like tough. But yeah, the Jays also were a major disappointment this year. I mean, how much money? I mean, for a city that puts, I think they put, what did they say? They put like tens of millions of dollars into this team and didn't even make it into the postseason. So it's been a disappointment. I think arguably the problem with the Jays is a managerial team, a managerial problem. There just needs to be more thought put into how this money is used. And then also, I was just listening to a podcast kind of postseason, and they were talking about how Most of the Jays players are also free agent players. There's nobody with long-term contracts except for I think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I could be wrong actually. Don't quote me on that. And a team that's basically just leaning on that guy's talent is not good because none of the players on this team feel any incentive to commit to the team. So they're just kind of showing up for the paycheck. And it's like, that's no way to win. I mean, and also I've been watching this show. I'm getting ready for the new hockey season. So we're in preseason NHL too, but which is exciting for me because I grew up playing hockey, but I was always kind of like, sports, whatever. And now it's kind of like, it's exciting for me because it's a way I connect again to heritage and all this stuff. But I've been watching this show Shoresy, which is this new show by, what's his name? I can't remember his name, but he did that show Letterkenny. So
Okay.
it's it's one of the most Canadian shows you'll ever watch in your life. And in it, he talks about how they're like, oh, are they players who really love to win? It's like they may love to win, but what's more important is that they hate to lose. And I think this is like you need to get players on your team that hate to lose. I think this is you have to hate to lose more than you love to win, I think. And I think
There's
that
a lot of Michael Jordan in that.
yeah, the Jays just didn't hate losing enough. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure
So we'll
did.
see. But yeah, maybe there'll be some baseball paintings. Who knows?
Who
Who knows?
knows?
Who knows?
Well, as always, David, one, huge congratulations on all of the continued development of your work and the recognition that you're getting from, places like Platform, David Zwirner. You've I don't even want to use the word breakthrough, but I think it's always worth acknowledging when such a milestone occurs.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that, and I'm very excited about if what comes from next from that. Even if nothing comes next, it's just I'm incredibly grateful, and it's been so far very positive feedback, and I just hope a lot of positive comes out of it, and that's what I really like pray for each day.
Amen. Amen. Well, again, thank you for tapping in today. And let's, of course, catch it up again soon.
Thanks, John. Yeah, always grateful. Appreciate you, and thanks for letting me on the show.
Talk to you soon.